Hi, today I wanted to talk a little bit about the mental state or the state of consciousness in Putin. So normally I stay away from politics if I can, but in this case I think this scenario can give some indications or some interesting points about the evolution of consciousness and the states of consciousness. So of course you have this war where Russia invaded Ukraine. But what's happening inside the mind of Putin? What is there if we look inside the mind of Putin? Now, the first indication is, of course, the external behavior. You can find indications of the internal states of consciousness of Putin in the external behaviors. For example, you notice that he keeps a big distance between him and other people. Literally a physical distance between him and the other people. You saw the images with the table where he sits on one end and the other people sit very far away from him on the other side of a very large table. This in itself is the perfect illustration of disconnect, making a distance. So you already see in the behavior that Putin is in a state of disconnect, a state of not being connected with the world around him. Now, in my concept of the alchemy of consciousness, this state of not being connected is one of the characteristics of the unhealthy states of consciousness. So in consciousness, you have the unhealthy states of consciousness and you have the healthy states of consciousness. These unhealthy states of consciousness are recognizable by things of disconnect, or you can summarize them under being disconnected, experiencing a disconnect between yourself and the world. And basically, that state of disconnect is what we would call fear. Now, the healthy side of consciousness, the opposite of that, are the states of consciousness where there's connection. Now, this state of connection is what we experience as love. So, love is being connected, feeling a connection between you and the outside world. While on the other side, the unhealthy states of consciousness, they're characterized by fear, experiencing a disconnect between you and the world around you. So this is what you can notice with Putin. You notice fear. You notice him experiencing not being connected or not wanting to connect with the world around him. You notice him making physical disconnection with the world around him, but also keeping distance between him and the people that should advise him. He also created a bubble for himself where the information he gets is the information that people think he wants to hear. So he doesn't get the information from the other people around him that should guide him and should give him information that he needs to hear. He gets the information that they think he wants to hear. So it creates a bubble of an alternative reality. And that too is something you can notice in a state of disconnect. Because in a state of connection, where you do have this connection with the world, you experience the world as it really is. You are connected with this outside world. So in the case of Putin, you notice like the disconnect, not being connected with the outside world, and basically it comes down to fear. Now, if you look at the building blocks of consciousness on the unhealthy side, which are the building blocks of consciousness that are active, that are basically governing his behavior? Because these little building blocks, the basics elements of consciousness, if they are stimulated, if they are energized, eventually they grow up and lead to actions in doing, in thinking, or in speaking. So which are the basic elements of consciousness that are active in the mind of Putin? Now, the first thing you can observe is greed. This whole story about making the empire of the past big again, or making Russia great again, is based on the basic building block of consciousness that's called greed. This need of power and increasingly more power is also based on fear, because the more fear you have, the more power you think you need to have to control the world around you. But that too is linked to fear, to greed. So we already have greed, fear. Now the other thing is lack of empathy, because when you're connected with the world around you, you experience empathy. Empathy is on the opposite side, is in the healthy states of consciousness. Empathy is where you care for another person. Now this care can only be there when and if you are connected to the other person, when you are feeling a connection with the other person. In the scenario on the other side, the unhealthy states of mind, you have a lack of empathy, because you don't experience this connection with the world around you and with the people around you. That's why you can see in Ukraine this brutal killing of innocent people, the most innocent beings that you can imagine, like small babies, people in hospitals. It's a total lack of empathy. So all of that is based in unhealthy states of mind. So in the theory of the alchemy of consciousness, how do you bring these unhealthy states of consciousness that you can see present in Putin in his mind, how do you transfer them, how do you transform them into healthy states of consciousness? That's the big question. So we already see in Putin's mind, we can observe greed, fear, and a lack of empathy. So which do we have on the healthy state of consciousness, on the healthy side of consciousness? Empathy, the feeling of connection, experiencing this feeling of connection. So loving feelings or feelings of connection. And the opposite of greed is charity. So how do you stimulate these types of elements of consciousness? How do you energize those? Because if you energize these healthy states of consciousness, you take away the energy from their opposite side, the unhealthy stages. So how do you transform these unhealthy states into the healthy states? Now, greed is transformed into charity by providing information, experiences, or thoughts linked to charity. So, for example, if Putin would see acts of charity, would experience by himself by doing charity, or by experiencing people providing charity towards him, it would all take away from this negative state of greed, and it would feed the opposite of charity. It would feed the healthy state. Of course, it's not easy. Normally, what are the things that feed this healthy state? In most cases, in most cultures, that's the task of religion and spirituality. Now, in Russia, you have a problem with that, because the high spiritual leader in Russia is also in this unhealthy state of consciousness. In him, you also see greed and the need to expand material possessions. So he's not in a state where he's capable to stimulate the healthy stages of consciousness in Putin. It's in his advantage, or he thinks in short term that is in his advantage to be in that state and to stimulate those states. So from spiritual leadership in Russia, we will not get the input that Putin would need to go from this unhealthy state over to the healthy state. The therapy that Putin needs is being confronted with charity. So protests in Russia, which are outlawed, but if there would be protests, they would best focus on things like charity. And then, of course, it's a matter of Putin being confronted with them too, because there might be charity, but Putin might not even see it or get to see it. But it gives you some idea. Lack of empathy is, of course, stimulated by empathy. So everything that stimulates empathy, exposing Putin to information or experiences of empathy, allowing him to experience empathy or seeing empathy in other people's, like in the movies or in books he reads, will stimulate this healthy state of consciousness. People that Putin looks up to or that have authority for Putin should display empathy to stimulate the energy going into this state of consciousness, or this element of consciousness of empathy, and the energy being drawn away from this lack of empathy. And fear, the opposite of that is connection, experiencing connection, being exposed to information and experiences of connection. So here, of course, you have all the sanctions from the Western world, which are needed because someone needs to indicate that there's something wrong with your worldview, or this behavior will not be tolerated. So, of course, what can you do besides sanctions? But sanctions, they also stimulate like all these negative elements of consciousness. They don't take away the energy or the underlying elements of consciousness that are basically governing Putin, his behavior and thought process, being fear, lack of empathy, probably distrust. But you can see all these things like and greed. But you can see all these things are connected, like the unhealthy states of mind, the unhealthy building blocks of consciousness. They're all related. So you can see it, they give rise to the same type of behaviors: lying, cheating, killing, plundering, taking away from other people. All these things are based in the negative part of consciousness. So you want to find ways to stimulate the healthy side of consciousness, the wholesome building blocks of consciousness. So again, you do that by exposing a person to information, by books, by videos, through music or whatever, through conversations, where these more healthy state of consciousness are being stimulated. Okay, I hope that gives you some insight of what's going on inside the mind of Putin. If you enjoyed this video, you would do me a great pleasure by letting me know by giving me a thumbs up. And also, if you have any questions about the extra possibilities of the human mind, please do let me know in the comments below, and I might actually answer your question in an upcoming video. Also, if you would like to be notified when my next video is ready, just subscribe to my channel and you will receive a notification and be the first to know when my next video is ready for you.